thank you all of you for coming, and we have some really interesting thought leaders here, Joseph, in this space. So let's begin. I want to have maximum time for questions, but could you begin for those sad, demented people who haven't actually incredibly read the book yet? Could you summarize it, not so you don't have to buy it, but just to tantalize them, summarizing it let's give you 3 sentences, bearing in mind the minister's sentence lasted 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. Well, how long do I have?
I would say, do a summary in 3, however long you think.
Like 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you, first of all, Anthony, for inviting me. And his book is much more substantial than mine. So please read his book before reading mine. And if you start with his book, you don't need to read mine. So that's why I'm here. Essentially, I'm starting with the premise that, in fact, we are going to see a sea change because of AI, a sea change in terms of the workforce and also in terms of jobs. There are various projections that up to 50% of the jobs we know are going to disappear in the next 20 years in the advanced economies, and that in the emerging economies, up to 70% of these jobs are going to disappear. Therefore, what is the mission of higher education? And the mission of higher education is to help people become robot-proof. How do you become robot-proof? Robot-proof is a journey. And it's a journey that will last a lifetime, which is good for us educators. We start by proclaiming that every student has to master in his or her journey humanics. And what is humanics? It's the integration of 3 literacies, and a tech literacy, understanding machines and how to interact with machines, data literacy, understanding the sea of data generated by machines, and the third literacy, the human literacy, namely focus on what we humans do that machines cannot duplicate for the foreseeable future, which is the opportunity, with the ability that we have to be innovative, entrepreneurial, to be creative, to be culturally agile, to look at people and understand their body language, to work in teams, to be global, etc., etc. So essentially the theme is, yes, understand machines, understand how humans interact with machines, but focus on what we humans do that machines do not do. The second leg is that you can spend a lot of time studying books about creativity, entrepreneurship, cultural agility, empathy, etc. It doesn't make you one. So you have to practice that. And this is where experiential education comes into play. And experiential education allows you to hone your understanding, to hone your attributes, and to refine them. But also, it gives you an edge. And I'm happy to discuss that later. But it gives you an edge over machines, because essentially through experiential education, what you're doing is transfer, far transfer. And machines are simply not good at that. So that's another edge that we have over machines. The third aspect is that, AI is going to keep moving. They'll displace more jobs and they'll be getting more advanced. Therefore, we all are becoming obsolete on a daily basis. And we have to retool. And lifelong learning has to be integrated as part of what we do in higher education. Our mission is not to educate the 18 to 22 or beyond, and focus on PhD and research. Our mission is to educate people for life. And once you integrate lifelong learning as part of the core mission of higher education, then it forces you and it leads you to rethink the way you are doing. You are providing your teaching, you are providing learning in terms of customization and personalization. And so, Anthony, you talked about that too. So I'll be happy to discuss that. So we are now in a situation where humans need education more than ever. And this is where I believe that we live the golden age of higher education, and I'm happy to expand on that.
So what does it mean, Joseph, to be human? What is the human residual or space which will never be replicated by artificial intelligence?
Never, we can say, in our lifetimes, my life expectancy is around 65 years. You're not supposed to laugh about that. You're supposed to agree and say, why not more? But essentially, in our lifetimes, it is clear that machines will not be able to be creative, innovative, entrepreneurial, will not be able to work with teams of humans and interact with them, will not be able to be culturally agile, will not be able to be global, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, hone the human skills, focus on the human skills. Yes, for machine human interactions, and focus on what we humans do that they cannot do. The other aspect that's important, as I said, we know how to transpose our knowledge from a domain to another. So, far transfer. I'll give you an example here. An example based on humanism, on purpose. We had a student who studied English literature. And she went to Bosnia on a long-term co-op. Co-ops are those internships that last for 6 months. And there she was able to notice that there is a real challenge there in terms of fake news because people were led to go to bridges where snipers were waiting for them by saying, look, those bridges are safe. And so she started a not-for-profit. And this not-for-profit allowed her to debunk the fake news immediately and to send warnings. And we asked her, how were you able to do it? Well, she used the tools of literary criticism to debunk fake news. That's a notion of transfer that we do very well that machines don't do. It's one example among many. But the whole idea is that we live in multiple contexts. We know how to negotiate multiple contexts, and machines simply cannot do the transfer. And that's an edge, a further edge that we have over machines.
Yet. And I suppose it depends on our time horizon. Governments the world over find it difficult to think beyond their next election. They can't even think often that far. And so we have a deficit of long-term thinking. To me, I don't know if you agree, the threat from, as well as the opportunity, but we're just talking about the threat from the whole 4.0 cluster of technologies is far more serious to the future of humanity than global warming, which itself is a major threat. But in global warming, the smart money is on getting a cure. With AI, the smart money is on making it go further and further in the interests of the large tech companies. Comment, please.
So that's why I said that we live the golden age of higher education. Why? Because higher education has focused essentially on the 18 to 22, more or less. I mean, if you are working with adults, it's simply around the idea of getting them a bachelor's degree or getting them their first post-high school degree, in however you call it. But in fact, if you look at it, the toll that we mention on people, on us, is going to be large if we are going to become obsolete. And somebody has to do it. Somebody has to provide that. Well, we're going to release tomorrow at the Chatham House a survey of citizens in the UK, in Canada, and in the United States with respect to their attitude about AI. And they all said, yes, we understand that AI is going to displace us, but we want the employers to take care of that, not universities. That's worrisome. Why is it worrisome? For a variety of reasons. Let me start with the United States, for instance, as an example. In the United States, the number of employers providing lifelong learning or retooling or re-education is going down. Why? Because the average tenure of an employee is less than 5 years. In Silicon Valley, incidentally, it's 2 years. So they have no incentive to help the employees and retool and redefine themselves. So that's one aspect. The second aspect is that in the United States, for instance, a third of the people in the workforce are involved in gig activities. self-employed, so they don't have employers. So look at it. We are facing a situation in the United States where over 74% of learners are non-traditional learners. They cannot rely fully on employers, and therefore, who's going to step in? Higher education. And therefore, the demand is not going to be to help students get into college, from high school into college. That's very important, but the demand is actually shrinking. Why? Because we're an aging population. On the other hand, the increase is going to be with lifelong learners. Higher education has not looked at lifelong learning as a core mission. We look at it as a second-class operation. And we risk becoming like the railway industry in the United States. When they saw the onset of the airline revolution, they said, "This is not for me. I am in the, I'm not in the airline business." Whereas, in fact, they were impacted because they were in the transportation business. Our mission is the same thing. It's not to educate 18 to 22, but to educate people throughout their lives. So it's time to integrate lifelong learning as part of our core mission. This is going to lead us, Anthony, to do it not on our terms, but to do it on theirs, and that you talked about it yourself, and the notion of customization, on demand, the notion of certificates, stackable certificates, etc., will come into play because our offerings have to meet the needs of the learner, and we cannot ask them to come back to college. So, going back to your question, I think we are facing an enormous societal challenge and enormous societal opportunities, and that's the opportunity for higher education to step in.
So, a very significant university leader last night said, "Oh, well, this is just the latest technological revolution." Is AI the latest technological revolution, or is it qualitatively game-changing and different?
Well, he or she was right. It is the latest. Is it, so no one can deny that. Is it qualitatively different? There is a massive displacement of humans in a short period of time. Yeah. And therefore, the toll is high. So we have to keep that in mind. And, when the projections are 50% of the workforce is going to become obsolete in the next 20 years, that's a huge toll. So it's significant. In the long run, we'll all be dead. You heard that before. We don't know what will happen 75 years from now. But for the time being, this is something we need to work on. Incidentally, it's going to lead us, Anthony, to rethink the notion of access. In higher education, we focus on access along the following lines. We need to get students to move from high school to college or to universities. That's very important. But access has to be on a lifelong basis. What does it mean? Our systems, our policies, our financial aids are not geared toward that. So that's where we are.
All of that is absolutely true. Could you just explain what is different about machine learning? What is different about AI? And bearing in mind that the computing power will be, I don't know where you come on this, in the next 15 years, experts think it's going to be between 20 and 1 million times more powerful. These machines already know us better than our partners in significant respects. What is different about AI?
Look, AI in some ways, and here I'm putting my other hat as a linguist and cognitive neuroscientist, essentially AI is trying to mimic what we do. It's not more profound than that. They succeed in some aspects and they are superior to us in some aspects and way short in other aspects. Where are they superior to us? In computations. We all know that. Including face recognition that you are hearing about, etc., etc. Where they come short, as we said, is in what we do well. This ability that we have to be creative, to do the far transfer in terms of moving our knowledge and apply it in an unexpected way in other contexts, in being very culturally agile, in reading a room, reading the body language, etc. That's where the situation is. So people are panicking because we're saying, people are saying, look, we're becoming obsolete. And yes, we have to worry about, but if we compete with machines on their own terms, we lose. If they compete with us on our terms, they lose. And therefore, it's not a question of now competition anymore. It's a question, what is their sweet spot and what is our sweet spot? What can we do they cannot duplicate? And we have plenty. It's the human literacy is this ability that I repeat of being creative, of being culturally agile, of being global, of reading people in different contexts and transferring our knowledge from a context to another. For the foreseeable future, in our lifetimes, you're not going to see machines duplicating that.
Okay, so I would say that our lifetime's fine, but there are some people in the audience, many indeed, who are under 30, and even those who are not many will have children, and some of those will have children's children. So that sense of responsibility, there's a lot of kicking the ball into touch. There's a lot also in what you say, Joseph, about them and us. It's a binary, there's them and there's us, and we've got to get it on our terrain and fight this game on our pitch, not on their pitch. And you're also saying you are an optimist about this technology not getting as good as human beings at creativity, at reading culturally, at reading people's faces. I think that is wrong. I think we are 10 or 15 years away only, and I think already it's happening on all those domains. So I think it's a more serious issue. That said, you are the most brilliant mind in universities today talking about all of this. And thank you, and it's a privilege to have you
Thank
here.
you very much.
Great privilege. Let's have questions. And if you're close to the front, just belt it out. Yup. Paul Feldman, head of JISC, which is the... tell Joseph what JISC is if he doesn't know.
JISC is the UK's digital body for higher and further education, and a key goal of ours is to really push this into universities, for example. I mean, one challenge I would say is I think this is a joyous opportunity. We can free people from drudgery. Drudgery is as much manual as it is physical historically. But the real issue, as it was in the first or the second industrial revolution, was around transition.
Absolutely.
And I completely agree we need to educate our children for lifelong learning. But how do we get all those accountants whose job is going to be lost, all those lawyers whose job is going to be lost today, to understand lifelong learning because they don't?
Look, okay, that's sorry, Anthony. You're the MC. I'm
no. You go ahead.
Please, whatever you want.
I want you to go ahead.
Okay. Look, that's a great point. I have been discussing a lot with some heads of companies worldwide, and they said, look, we're very good. Two points. We're very good at helping people upskill, but we're not good at helping people reinvent themselves in different domains. I'm in the banking industry. I want to move and be in another creative industry, whatever it is, and they're not there for you. So that's one aspect. We have to understand who's going to provide it. Second, you have to offer it. And third, we understand that some people will be able to reinvent themselves, retool, reskill, upskill, and others will not. So, but if you don't offer that, you don't know whether they'll be able to do it. So our job is to facilitate that, even at the policy level. So for instance, we do not have a policy about lifelong learning in many countries. Singapore has something called a lifelong learning account that every citizen has. The Scandinavian countries are working on that. Whereas all our financial aid system, for instance, in the United States, are geared towards allowing people to access higher education after high school. So let's start with that. Some people will be able to do it, some will not. That's why some people have been talking about UBI, universal basic income, etc. But before even getting to that point, provide opportunities. We in higher education are not fulfilling these needs, And the society is not helping you redefine yourself. So let's start with those, and then let's worry about this aspect.
Can I just ask, can we just have the mic just for 1 sec, just back, and can you just tell people what GISC are doing on the 4.0 taught degree?
Okay, so yes, I wasn't expecting that. Yeah, so we're working here in the University of Buckingham in particular to look at what is possible. We're together with Anthony and the faculty here, we're trying to look at how soon we can actually introduce the first Education 4.0 course. So that's using all these technologies we're talking about to actually teach. So a lot of the conversation here is about how it's going to impact other sectors. What we're looking at is how is this going to impact higher and further education to revolutionize teaching.
And Anthony has been eloquent about that in his work. But let me tell you, I diverge with Anthony in one fundamental point. He says that he's pessimistic and I'm optimistic. He is an optimist too, for a simple reason. Otherwise, he won't remain as the Vice Chancellor of Buckingham.
Thank you very much indeed. And let's hear now from, we want to Rod Bristow here, we want to hear from everybody working with GISC and us on that project. Rod Bristow, and thank you for the sponsorship from Pearson.
Thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Professor Aoun, for your remarks, your optimism. I want to buy the book. Can I buy it here?
Yes.
I'll buy a copy later today. I think your point about experiential learning is the thing I'd just like to pick up on a little bit, because in many ways, if perhaps in all respects, education, learning is always the result of experience. So learning is an active process. It's an experience that leads to learning. And most universities are very good at providing a certain kind of experience, the sort of traditional academic experience of learning how to put together analysis, argument, discourse, refutation of hypotheses, etc. Other kinds of experiences that are important and going to be really important in the future, and I'll give you an example of one. We did some research with University of Oxford and Nesta about how the future of work would affect the kind of jobs that there are in the future, and this research threw up that teaching would be one of the growth job opportunities, because of the fact that teaching is a fundamentally human endeavor, and influencing other humans, something that machines will probably find very hard to do. And yet, our universities, is this really the strength of universities to provide the experiences that lead to the kind of learning that's going to be important to the future? Or how will universities need to change to address this experiential learning point?
I mean, look, it's a great point, because essentially we have to consider whether our world, our boundaries, are the boundaries of the campus or not. So in my own university, the students go on, what we call co-ops, which are 6 months internships. We are in 134 countries, and we have 3,000 employers in for-profits and NGOs worldwide. Before they go, we prepare them to understand themselves, to understand the institution they are going to join. They apply, they get paid, and we have a mentor there, and then when they come back, we integrate that in the classroom. The mentor helps them integrate there. And what's the idea? The idea of experiential from this point of view is to allow you to understand what you're good at, where others are good at, and also to understand how to interact with people and how to be culturally embedded in another country or another setting or another city, and how to start looking at how people are approaching things from a different perspective, and also frankly to look at the gaps. Many students come back and say those institutions should have done that. I'm going to launch a not-for-profit or for-profit. So the question that we're facing in higher education are we in a monastic tradition, and there is nothing wrong about that, where we are spending 2 or 3 or 4 years within the confines of a campus? Or are we saying to ourselves, the world is too interesting to ignore, let's integrate that as part of our educational experience?
Now, Joseph, if you are willing, can we just have some questions just because we've out of time? Can we just have a series of questions? I don't know if you can make a note or just remember very quickly, straight to the question.
The title of the session is Preparing Students for the 21st Century. Given the pace of change, is it possible to predict the future, or are we better in education looking back to the past, to the liberal education, the best that's been thought and said?
Which is a better guide, the past or the future in preparing students? And then, Guy.
Guy Mallison, Learning Child, I was previously at the Open University, so I think the focus on lifelong learning is fascinating. My question relates to the ability of traditional universities to make that shift into a more of a lifelong learning mode. I think your analogy with trains and planes is very apposite. It's not easy to make that shift, and other industries show it's very difficult for incumbents to move into new markets.
And then very quick question here, and then one at the back. Yes?
Yes, thank you. You said that you were a linguist.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about Noam Chomsky, who's very concerned about the death of universities. But it seems that what's happening now with AI is that what's being suggested is that humanities and social science, rather than being dead, which is what has been happening, those courses have been shut down, they're now going to be reinvigorated. It seems AI will save because of the human element, the need for the human element.
So is it going to be the boost that humanities and social sciences need in a very transactional world? And a question from the young man at the back. Yep.
Hello. In the legal forum...
Could you identify yourself,
yes,
please?
Adolfo Paolini from the law school here in Buckingham. In the legal forum, one of the big topics at the moment we are discussing is artificial intelligence and ethics. What are your short views on this?
Okay. So
4 questions,
Yes.
and the organizer is going like this.
Okay, so short-term memory, machines are better at short-term memory than us. So let me try to remember the questions. I will bring the 2 questions together in about the past, the present, and the liberal arts. That's what you... I think this is why I talked about human literacy on purpose. Human literacy is once again, what we excel at. The liberal arts, the way they have been practiced, at least in many universities, has divorced itself from that by focusing on theories. You know, the latest theory, I want to be a theory, to provide you with a theory of X. You take the old ones, Lacan, etc. That's not the way. The way focus, and I will not spend too much time on that, focus on understanding the human ability. However you want to do it, that's fine. That's one aspect. So the second aspect is about change. What you are saying is difficult for universities to change. I believe that in universities, we have done it in some ways in the wrong way because we want a consensus before proceeding. So we, you know, in the United States, for instance, in many other countries, there is a faculty senate. The faculty have to vote on something before initiating that. What we decided to do is foster a culture of experimentation and innovation. We don't vote on anything. We ask people who wants to partake and launch something that is going in a different direction. Nothing mandatory. If they launch it and they succeed, they are the proof, and it makes it and they become the ambassadors, the pioneers, and because in every time you have a change, and I'm not saying anything profound, it has been documented. You know, universities are very conservative. We want to change the world. We don't want to change ourselves. So the way to do it, every time when you face change, you have 3 groups. The early adopters, small groups. The naysayer, small groups. The large majority is wait and see. If you empower people who are ready to run with something, then they become the ambassadors, the pioneers, and they will carry the rest. Finally, you know, the question of ethics. You know, this is a question in terms of ethics and law. This is a question that is pervasive everywhere. And the way I look at it is that we have to focus on a human-centered AI. And that's the message that I would like to ask you to carry today. It's a human-centered AI, and that will bring the two together. And yes, I'm an optimist from this point of view, Anthony, and thank you for inviting me.
Well, and thank you. And just one of many reflections. You know, when you're listening to a great mind, we had Michael Ignatieff kicking off today, Chris Skidmore, the most scholarly universities minister that we've had in this country, and now the global impact of you, Joseph. Thank you also for reminding us what it means to be a really good and a really nice, to use that word, human being. You epitomize what you talk about when you're talking about humanics.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anthony. Thank you. You were great. Thank you. Thank you.